Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. A lot of black folks just ain't gonna make it, and we have to own up to that reality. A lot of black people are fighting for their survival, but a lot of us have decided to twerk and get turned up and blowed out until we drop dead or the white supremacists do us in. A lot of black people simply do not care about their own survival, and the white media will trip over its own shoelaces to be the first to give those Negroes a platform. That brings us to Hoochie Con. I swear you can't make this stuff up. First bust it, baby, now this. And it's a con, all right. This is what the LA Times has been putting out. They are running black people out of Los Angeles, running black people out of San Francisco. They've been done run us out of San Diego, and they're on their way to try to run black people out of Oakland too. They are ethnically cleansing black people from the entire state. And this is what the white media in Los Angeles decides needs to be focused on. Now, the woman on your screen is Zorine Truly. That's her name, Zorine Truly. And if you want some kind of idea of what Hoochie Con is about, basically it's supposed to be a love fest for Ratchet culture from the 1990s. They actually consider BAPS, you know, that movie with Halle Berry and her friend playing the part of ghetto stereotypes complete with gold teeth, who happen to be showing affection and concern for an old white man. To them, this is a classic movie. Yeah, who needs Spike Lee when you've got wonderful cinematic fare like this? What is the difference between BAPS and all of those little dirty blackface movies from the early 20th century? The year they were made in. That's it. And we also need to talk about the writer, a woman named Martine Thompson. The name sounds like an immigrant, particularly from the islands. When you read her writing, it's chock full of all of the intersectional buzzwords that she no doubt picked up from whatever white liberal feminist she's imitating. It's like an evil AI program being told to imitate Tiffany Cross. And if you want an idea of some of the pearls of wisdom that this Martine Thompson woman was dropping, how's this one for you? Hoochie's flipped narrow, misogynoir-fueled ideas of what a good or respectable or fashionable woman can look like. And that's one of the main themes of her writing. She talks about black women, but you'll also find that half the time she's just saying people or women in general without the black on it. You will see that again. Misogynoir, by the way, one of the favorite terms used by the Shea Butter Bootlick crowd. You know that train's never late. She posts things on Instagram and it's just more word salad, usually the word black followed by a number of other unrelated terms having nothing to do with black people's interests. And people like her think that they're saying some really deep stuff. When people try to claim that hair and nails are somehow symbols of resistance in and of themselves, that's someone telling you that they've reduced black people down to just hair and nails. Now, for the slow coast with ADHD, yes, hair is certainly valid to talk about, but not out of context, which is what this woman does. We see white supremacists constantly attacking black people by cutting black children's hair or otherwise making our hair a target. So there's a reality there. But to single out hair as the end-all and be-all is to reduce black people in general and black women in specific to being nothing more than hair, and that's it. There's no power talk going on here. It's just more of the thoughts and feelings nonsense. Look how this makes me feel. Our feelings. I've got to talk about how this makes me feel. Now, I think it goes without saying that this woman's writing is featured in a lot of white media publications. She talks about black women, but you notice very quickly that most of her writing starts off saying black, and then before you know it, she pivots immediately to LGBT. That is a main theme of what she writes. She claims in the headlines this is about black women, but a couple of paragraphs later, it turns into a straight LGBT piece. Okay, but why not just say that from the very start? Why the bait and switch? In this very article, she wrote, the exhibit was co-organized and hosted by the popular queer community space Junior High last weekend. The exhibit's opening day featured the type of moody, bisexual lighting that promises a good time. I had to check first of all to see if bisexual was a typo. Turns out it's not. And I don't know why lighting promises a good time, but when I see sexual and good time in the same sentence, I take it they're not referring to a walk in the park, or seeing a movie, or going rollerblading. Oh, and I decided to click the link and check out Junior High LA's Instagram page. These are largely white people that are featured on this page, and as the LA Times article said, it's an LGBT organization, though they also have a lot of abortion sloganeering and feminist leftover rhetoric. Do you see the white media doing stories like this to celebrate any sort of dysfunction with any other group? Do you see the white media taking the lowest common denominator of white women and giving space to promote them to white women as their history and something they should aspire to? Of course not. This is the white media trying to dictate to us what our culture is. We have traditions all our own, cultural milestones and commemorations that honor and edify us. But they want to choose the lowest of the low, people who in many cases don't even come from the United States. And these are individuals who, by and large, if you ask them what they identify as, they'll say that they identify as LGBT, or as an immigrant, or that they identify as feminist, or something else, but what they won't say is that they identify primarily or solely as black, so they define their existence in terms of where their parents came from, or in terms of their sexual orientation, or what have you, but not in terms of the main thing that people see when they look at them, the main thing people consider when they deal with them. Now, the white media would never let us take some toothless hillbilly in Appalachia who weds their sister and slurps moonshine 3 squares a day and then tell white people this is white culture. No matter how widespread or pervasive these kinds of practices and behaviors are, they wouldn't do it. They don't let black people come along and tell them that dysfunction and degeneracy is who they are. The woman who they credit for this Hoochie-Con idea is a 37-year-old, so that means she's a millennial, and this LA Times propaganda piece lauds her for encouraging black women to harness the power of their sexuality and creative expression as they see fit. That's a word, by the way, that gets used ubiquitously throughout this entire piece. In fact, it seems to be a running theme of most of what this Martine Thompson woman writes. Well, I guess they figure since WAP has run its course and we rejected Get Your Booty to the Polls, this is what they're going to try next. They actually quoted this woman truly as having said, simply put, hoochies are pioneers for so many different genres of things. Pioneers? Different genres? And what genres did they pioneer? Thoughtology? The Ratchet adventure genre? Booty clapping for dollars? What have they pioneered? Because the point of pioneering is to explore. So what did they find? What did they establish? Talk about putting the bar on the ground. She then added not only did they pioneer it, they also had to suffer for it. They had to suffer to wear their hair the way they wanted to. They had to suffer to wear their nails the way they wanted to, and gold teeth, and to be sexually liberated. They had to suffer to shine. Well, first of all, when it comes to being sexually liberated, what the hell is she talking about? Black women have been perpetual targets for these white supremacists and presented as either being undesirable or as being oversexed. If there's any group who doesn't need to be talking about sexually liberated, it happens to be black women, but this is what they're saying. And what do they mean by sexually liberated? Who's been putting a chastity belt on black women? The white supremacists, true. But that's not who she talks about. She never talks about who it is that apparently is subjugating or otherwise repressing black women. But then again, as often as not, she usually says women as opposed to black women, so she really can't make up her mind. And I'll tell you right now, these hoochie mamas, they probably didn't suffer as much as the people who had to hear their loud caterwauling, especially at the grocery store, or the people who had to see their tacky clothing, or the people who had the misfortune of smelling the bug spray that most of them thought was perfume. They're actually trying to make some Rosa Parks stuff out of being Ratchet, which is what this is, and the white media are the ones publicizing this. Now, if you suspect that this Zorine woman is some kind of feminist, then give yourself a cigar. On Junior High LA's Instagram page, she's quoted as having said, "Hood feminism and hoochie feminism share similarities in their focus on non-traditional feminism. Rather than solely improving the lives of white women, these ideologies aim to uplift all women. Hoochie feminism leans more toward the extremes of sexual expression and is more geared toward the empowerment of black women." Yes, you read that correctly. Hood feminism, hoochie feminism. Just out of curiosity, what have black women gotten out of imitating the combative and pretentious airs of white feminists? How has feminism helped black women? It makes no more sense for a black woman to talk about feminism than it does for a black man to talk about men's rights activism. The problem facing black women is their race, not their gender. And it's the same for black men. And by the way, talking about this hoochie feminism, hood feminism stuff, this is some of that nonsense they picked up from some of these white liberal feminists, basically saying that anything and everything fits feminist ideology if you're just willing to pretzel it hard enough. Now, when you hear some black person talking about gender nonsense, that's a black person who thinks that they can escape the struggle of being black by focusing on something else. It's an empty distraction and nothing more, but it's also part of what fuels a lot of these fools' interest in claiming that they're intersectional. What they think they're doing is they're escaping blackness, but they're just playing a rhetorical game with themselves. And yes, this quote by this Zorine woman claims her to be a hoochie historian. Anyone who embraces this as their history won't have a future. So there you have it, a neo-feminist working against our interest and constantly talking about sex because she sees that as her power. Let me tell you something. Using sex as your power is a young woman's game, but it's a game you can't win. And when you're almost 40 and admittedly you put on a couple of pounds, then we're not talking about sexual power anymore. We're talking about using the only trick you know, and the white media wants us to celebrate this. And don't let anyone try to dismiss this as merely being a puff piece about fashion, or, well, this is just about style. It's an homage to style from the 90s. No, they talk about this as a way of life, something that black people ought to be imitating and trying to somehow live in their everyday lives. Well, if this is the lifestyle they're trying to sell us, then it's a life that's not worth living. This is nothing more than a clumsy front for the same old buffoonery the white media is always pushing on us. For many years now, the black grassroots have been pushing back and influencing the internal discourse of the black community. And this is the white media's response. And no, I was not at all surprised to find that this Zorina Truth woman is from Tennessee, which seems to be competing with Atlanta to see who can be the Ratchet capital of the universe. You can call Ratchet behavior brave, or claim that it's pushing boundaries, or try to make people think that there's some sort of social significance to running around looking like a stereotype from the 80s and the 90s, but nobody's fooled. You can apply all the words that are normally used for honorable behavior to this mess, but nobody's going to fall for it. This is not art, any more than shaking your behind in Walmart is, or making your booty clap in church is art. It's just sad. This pathetic trend that we've been subjected to for the last 10 years or so. You got a lot of millennials, and truth be told, half of the Gen Xers, who are aging out and retreating back to their glory years, which is basically the 90s and the late 80s, and trying to dredge back up all that old stuff that isn't relevant, and truth be told, holds us back. This is some dried out hood rats and sophisticated hood rats who are trying to feel better about the way they live their lives. These were the types of females who went to Freaknik back in the day, and this pathetic habit of taking pseudo-academic jargon and using flowery praise to try to make a reeking pile of dysfunction stink a little bit less won't work. They're trying to make their prurient behavior seem meaningful, and it's not. By the way, this is some of the art that was on display at Hoochie Con. I don't know art, and apparently whoever made this mess doesn't either, but I do know that this doesn't inspire, inform, or touch anyone. What it shows is tatted up, tacky hood rats smoking and posing in their ridiculous nails. It's a damn shame. And this is in Los Angeles, which helps you explain why black people have been catching hell there. Now, you had Brother Tariq, who conducted the FBA Expo just a few weeks ago, and he's promoting the Hidden History Museum. Things that actually dignify black people. Now, if the LA Times wanted to talk about black culture, they should have been reporting on what Brother Tariq's doing, but they didn't, because they oppose black people being shown as we truly are. This is the white media counter-programming against all of the positive steps that they've seen the black grassroots making. And as a people, when you have black folks who are trying to help the white media push this propaganda, that presents us with a stark choice. I've told you often about institutions, which are nothing more than groups of people who come together for the purpose of protecting and promoting a particular idea. What idea are you dedicated to protecting? Black empowerment or Babson Foxy Brown? They focus on this mess, try to dress it up as being thoughtful or honorably rebellious, when it's just the same old whorehouse mentality that the white media's always tried to push. We can be disgusted, though none of us can be surprised. This is where practically all the anti-black images and ideas come from, the white media. Hoochie Con indeed. They should have just called it Hood Rat Con because that's what it is. Though if they just called it a plain con, that would be the most accurate description of all. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Michael, Kenneth Prescia, Jimmy Whitfield, Mark Singleton, and Nancy. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.